Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk from Jerusalem, Israel. Today, Aleph Nisan, Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the month of Nisan, 5777, and the first day of the rest of our lives. And it's March 28th, 2017. This week, Parshat Vayikra, beginning of the third book of the 5 books of Moses, the very heart, the very center of the Torah. With me in the studio, Yitzchak Reuven, not feeling all that well today, but he's going to do his best to speak up a little bit. 2 weeks from today exactly, the glorious festival of Passover. And it doesn't get too much better than this. It is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It is the first day of the month of Nisan. Such a beautiful time of renewal. It is called the first of the months by the Torah. The Book of Exodus, chapter 12. This month shall be for you, the first of all the months. It is also known as the month of redemption. Our sages tell us that just as Israel was redeemed in the month of Nisan, so too in the future they will be redeemed in the month of Nisan. And the month of Nisan is all about renewal. It's all about just everything becoming revitalized, renewed. It is the headquarters for all spiritual growth and newness. And it's happening right now. And today is the day of the establishment of the tabernacle in the desert. Today is the very day about which our sages tell us this is the day, the first day of the month of Nisan, which actually validates all of creation and actually brings it all together. The expression of the Holy Zohar is that this is the day that so completes creation. It's the perfume of creation, because all God ever wanted was a dwelling place in this world, was to be welcomed into this world.
It's not just today, but it's also exactly where we're at in our parshat, correct?
Correct.
Vayikra, that's the first day. In the
Exactly.
tabernacle, am I correct?
Well, actually, in Parshat Shmini, in 2 more Torah portions, that opens up with, and it was on the 8th day. That's talking about today, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So the book of Vayikra begins with the instructions for the various offerings that are brought in the Holy Temple, but it's actually it's in Parshat Shmini that goes back to the theme of today, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which is what again? As we are taught, sages teach us 10 crowns were given on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. This is the expression, like 10 crowns descended on the beginning of the month of Nisan. And it's 10 levels, 10 attributes, 10 things by which the month of Nisan is lauded, and they are listed as follows. The sanctuary in the wilderness was inaugurated on Rosh Chodesh Nisan.
1.
This is the day, again, that because of that, because the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was inaugurated after the 7 days of the inauguration, during which Moshe basically took it apart and rebuilt it every day, which is very, very much parallel to the Kabbalistic idea of the worlds that Hashem himself created and destroyed before creating this one. You ever think about that, Yitzchak?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so the sanctuary in the wilderness was inaugurated, and then this day, it's like creation was completed. 2, Nachshon, who was the prince of the tribe of Judah, brought his offering. 3, Aaron himself began his duties as the Kohen Gadol. 4, the first communal offerings were brought. 5, fire came down from heaven to the altar, as is described in Parshat Shmini. 6, sacrificial portions were eaten within the designated borders of the sanctity of the camp. 7, the Shekhinah dwelt among the people. That should really be number 1. 8, it's the first day today. Can you feel it? It's the first day that the Birkat HaKohanim, the Kohanic blessing, was given to the people.
Wow. Yeah, makes sense.
9, from this moment on, it was henceforth forbidden for any offering to be brought on any private altar. All had to be brought to the altar in the holy temple. holy space at this time, the tabernacle. And 10, this is the day which was designated as Rosh Chodesh, and numerous sections of the Torah were revealed on the First of Nisan. The idea being of this teaching that all of these different things came together in a powerful radiance, in a powerful, very, what do you say, utzmati? Very intense kind of spiritual high on this day. And the truth is, the whole month of Nisan has a characteristic of a festive nature. There were many rabbis and leaders throughout the generations that would wear their holiday finery all throughout this entire month. We don't say the Tachanon prayers. We don't say there are certain aspects of like a holiday that are prevalent all month long, even before Passover. And the idea, spring is in the air. It's really what it really is that redemption is in the air. Newness is in the air. The world is blooming. Everything is becoming new. Everything is turning green. Everything is sprouting forth life. And like we've said before, not that all of that is coincidentally happening in the month that Israel left from Egypt, but no, it's happening because Israel left Egypt this month and bequeathed to the whole world the idea of what it really means to be free and to serve Hashem alone. I'm going to tell you another amazing thing about this whole concept of Rosh Chodesh Nisan. I mean, every Rosh Chodesh is an encapsulation of the whole year. Every month brings its theme. Every month brings its opportunity for spiritual growth. But as we've mentioned before, the month of Nisan is really the beginning of time, as it were. It's the beginning of everything, because we read in Exodus 12, which is, of course, what we read last week as the Maftir, Parshat HaChodesh. Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron, while yet in the land of Egypt, right, in the heart of darkness, this month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be for you the first months of the year. And I have to tell you, everything is renewed. Everybody is renewed. The whole world is renewed constantly. There are cycles of renewal all the time. But what's interesting about Nisan, Yitzchak, what's interesting is that this verse tells us, HaChodesh hazeh lachem, Rosh Chodeshim Rishon hu lachem l'chodshei Hashana, for you. So what I'm saying is there's something very intimate and particular about the renewal of the Jewish people in the month of Nisan, which is even at a different level than the renewal of the rest of the world. This is a personal bond. Mm-hmm. This is a personal guarantee that Hashem is giving to Israel, that this, for you, it's not just that he's teaching Moshe that this is the way to measure time, the whole biblical standard of how the year, according to this concept of the Torah, it doesn't begin from Tishrei, but it begins from Nisan. It's not just a question of the measurement of time, it's a question of the spiritual dynamic of how a person approaches Hashem and his servant Hashem all year round. It all begins with Nisan. So this is a great moment in time, and a very exciting one, because we really feel the challenge of living with the presence of Hashem in our midst. Today, Rosh Chodesh Nisan was celebrated by many, many Jewish people ascending the Temple Mount. Mm-hmm. Everything has changed as far as the Temple Mount is concerned. And we've been talking and reporting about the Temple Mount for so many years now, and our own personal connection, our own personal ascent to the Temple Mount, and the many, many people that we have brought, and the great activism that we have spearheaded for the Temple Mount. I have to tell you, it's all really paying off. It's all taken root, because today there are so many people of so many diverse backgrounds. I'm talking now about the Jewish people, in addition to many wonderful people from the nations that go. But it's been an uphill battle convincing the Jewish people of the relevancy to the Temple Mount to their lives. And today, when you look at the people that go, it's so different than it was when we began our campaign. There are so many people that are ascending the Temple Mount now, And it is very gratifying to see that there's a nerve that's been struck, that there is a real change taking place in the heart of the people, and it's really wonderful and amazing to see.
And for all you Texans out there, today Sid Miller, the Commissioner of Agriculture for the state of Texas, was on the Temple Mount. He's been here visiting in Israel, visiting some of the Jewish settlements in Samaria, and today he was on the Temple Mount, and that's good. That's good for everybody.
And the confluence of, today being the first of the month of Nissan, which is the day that the Shekhinah descended onto the tabernacle that had been inaugurated that very day. And this day, which is seen as such a tremendous time of rejoicing. I mean, it's even the time when the earth and the heavens itself rejoices. The whole idea of the verse, Yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz, let the heavens rejoice and the earth be glad, is talking really about this day because of the fact that Hashem's goal for creation was fulfilled in that he wants to have an abode in this world. And the confluence of all of this with this Shabbat and the reading of Parshat Vayikra is outstanding because, of course, now we are coming to the crux of the matter, the heart of the Torah, the most difficult part of the Torah for many people to deal with. What do we do with it? Should we just cut it out? Should we just pretend that it's not there? I refer, of course, to the fact that the Book of Leviticus is all about the offerings in the Holy Temple, which many people feel very uncomfortable with. How do we deal with it? How do we relate to it? It's I like the Torah. I think it's very timely. I think it's really moral. It's got a lot of wonderful lessons in it for how people should be better people and how they should treat each other and stuff like that. But gosh, what do I do with this business? Well, that's a problem for a lot of Jewish people who want to believe that the Torah is immutable and doesn't change and is forever and expresses Hashem's will. But gosh, what do we do with this part that just kind of sticks in the throat? And of course, that's what it's all about. That's why the Book of Vayikra begins with that little aleph, and it begins with that little call that not everyone can hear, and the whole idea of everything that the offerings in the Holy Temple represent, which is basically so much the opposite of the world that we live in now. The world that we live in now, which is one of personal gain, which is one that is basically drowning in narcissism. It is all about self-gratification. It's all about me. It's all about my priorities. And the whole concept of bringing an offering in the temple, which is such a humbling, traumatic experience, is all about the fact that I'm not in charge here at all, that I am not an animal, that man has a very, very lofty, sublime, holy duty to rise above his base instinct and to bring about change in this world. All the societies that are crumbling today and all the principles that are so, tarnished as far as how people relate to each other, how people act. The secret to understanding basically the total downfall of humanity throughout the ages is the fact that we don't understand what Hashem is telling us in the Book of Leviticus, which is that we need to be very, very sensitive to the divine image in which we were created, and the whole concept of what goes on in the Holy Temple is designed to constantly remind a human being of his inner spiritual source, root, nature, and how hard he has to fight constantly, how hard he has to battle with his own inclination with himself, and just to keep that godly image at the forefront of his consciousness. That's really what it's all about. So all this is coming to a tremendous head now as we accompany the people of Israel out of Egypt soon on Passover night, as we refrain from eating leaven, as we search now in these weeks that are preceding Passover, as we search our homes and hopefully our hearts for all the leaven which is forbidden on Passover, because it is the opposite of the goal that we're trying to achieve, which is total flatness of our consciousness in terms of a lack of personal ego, a lack of hubris, a lack of pride. We're looking now to leave Egypt, and leaving Egypt is all about realizing that it's only Hashem, that it's only up to Hashem. Why is everything dependent on the going out of Egypt? Everything in Torah is about that we were slaves in Egypt. So many times the Torah exhorts us to remember that we were slaves in Egypt. And then when we come every single week to the Holy Shabbat, which is the most important moment of the week, Friday night, where we sanctify the day and we bless Hashem that He created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, because we believe that He's still doing that now. And we refrain from the creative process on Shabbat because we give testimony that only Hashem is creating and not us. And at that moment, when we take a cup of wine and we bless Hashem and we sanctify Hashem and we give testimony, what do we say in that holy prayer of Kiddush over the wine? We say that this is a remembrance to the going out of Egypt, right? We don't say that this is a remembrance to the creation of the world. We say this is a remembrance to the going out of Egypt. And only that, the 10 Commandments, right? So everybody knows the first commandment is a statement, right? The first commandment is a statement. Okay, so some authorities maintain that the first commandment, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, right, is actually a reference to the commandment of believing in Hashem. But the point is, it's not a commandment. It doesn't say thou shalt not or thou shalt. It says, I am Hashem your God. But the point is, how come that first commandment doesn't say, I am the Lord your God who created the world? I am the Lord your God who sustains all life. The first commandment of the 10 Commandments says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Everything begins and ends on that point. Ever ask yourself, why? I'll tell you why. Because the relationship that we have with Hashem is personal and ongoing and constant. And that commandment is basically saying to us, just like I took you out of Egypt then, I am the only one who can constantly take you out of the narrow place that you're in. I am the one who constantly takes you out of slavery. And that's on the personal side. And on the global side, the idea is that what the Tziat Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt, represents not only for Israel but for the whole world, is fighting against the shackles that bind us, the slavery, the mental slavery, and the slavery to evil that the whole world is succumbing to. This whole concept that what that Passover represents is so super important for the whole world. The whole world has an absolute share in this message. And this is all happening now. And this is the season. This is the season for going out of Egypt. This is the season for renewal. This is the season for true freedom. So it's a tremendous blessing, and hopefully we shall have the presence of mind to be able to avail ourselves of everything that this season has to offer.
And this, in our time, as you and I, Rabbi, have been working for years, day and night, to revive the spark of interest in the Holy Temple, in renewing the service. It's all pretty amazing when you think that the completion of the tabernacle and the inauguration of the divine service in the tabernacle all was completed within the first year after leaving Egypt. And by the time they were to celebrate Passover in the desert, they had the tabernacle. It was all set up. We talk about the generation of the desert as being the greatest generation, with all their pitfalls, etc., etc. They left Egypt, they were at Sinai, but, they were great because they witnessed God at Sinai, they received Torah, but I think one of the real marks of greatness was that they rolled up their sleeves, got to work, and built that tabernacle within a matter of months, and got the thing going, and by the time they were ready to commemorate Passover, to commemorate Yetziat Mitzrayim, the leaving of Egypt in the desert, they already had the tabernacle set up, and the Shekhinah, God's presence, was dwelling within the camp.
Exactly, as we spoke about last week with the conclusion of Vayikra and Pekudah, the conclusion of the Book of Exodus, and the whole concept of the love story. For a lot of people today, look at these things like this is like a memorial, or like this is like, they look at the tabernacle the way that they would look at a synagogue, which is basically obligatory and boring. And that's not what's going on here at all. What's going on here is that this is like a living bond that we have in every aspect of our lives. That's what the Torah is beckoning towards us, and that's what this month is all about as well. So we're coming to the concepts that really separate the men from the boys as far as what this whole program is really all about. It's about becoming ourselves. It's about becoming real. It's about rising above the animal within us. It's about bringing some tranquility and peace to the world. That's what this whole vision is all about. So you got to fasten your seatbelts because we're about to leave Egypt. You got to just get ready to throw the dough on your shoulder and leave. There's no time to look back. And the question is if we will be able to do that, or if, God forbid, we in our generation once again will be from the 4/5 of the Israelites who stayed behind in Egypt and perished because they didn't have the moxie, as Yitzchak Reuven would like to say, to make that commitment and say, no, I'm going to live for Hashem. That's what it's really all about. That's what the tabernacle is all about. And this month of Nisan, it's so exciting what it brings us. And it truly is the joy of heaven and earth that Hashem wants to be in this world, and that we can uplift everything to that purpose. And like I said, if you want renewal, if you want to be new, then don't stay behind, because it really is up to us to latch on to this tremendous, intense energy that Hashem is broadcasting to us from this very moment, from the first day of the rest of our lives, which is the first day of the month of Nisan, which is the first day of time, which is absolutely what's happening right now. This month shall be for you the first.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. Today, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first day of the first month of the beginning of time. As the Rabbi has been explaining to us, today is also today is the 28th day of March, 2017. And as far as the Hebrew year, 5777. And I apologize if my voice is a little rough. I'm feeling a little under the weather, and if you heard a couple of coughs in the background in the first half of our show, I really apologize. I'll try to edit those out, but I don't know. Anyway, and the Rabbi is raising his eyebrows, just like I do sometimes. Yes, this Shabbat we read Parshat Vayikra, the very first Parsha of the Book of Leviticus, which, as the Rabbi was explaining, is the heart of the 5 books of Moses. It's the heart of the Torah, and of course, it's sort of the raison d'etre, because it's what we do in this fabulous tabernacle / Beit HaMikdash, holy temple, that we were commanded to create, and that the children of Israel created so with such alacrity. Is that the word?
Lovingly and electrically.
In the desert, getting it ready by the First of Nisan, less than a year after they had left.
Actually, by the
Egypt.
23rd of Adar is when the inauguration began.
Less than a year. Anyway, you mentioned earlier, Rabbi, the little aleph in Vayikra, the first word of the Book of Leviticus. And of course,
Is
Vayikra,
written
the
with
last
a
letter is an aleph, and it's written small in a Sefer Torah. It's written small, which is very unusual. And there's lots of different interpretations as to why that may be. And you mentioned also a couple of other things. I'm going to tie it all together. You mentioned humility, that the avodah, the service, the offerings in the tabernacle, holy temple, they basically are an exercise in humility and in learning and recognizing that it's not about us and that it's God's world and we are His honored guests in the world. And that aleph, that little aleph, is the first letter of the word ani, which is me, which is my ego, and we diminish it. But here, Vayikra, it's God actually calling to Moshe, even though God's name's not mentioned, which is another aspect of God teaching us humility. And you mentioned the First Commandment, Anochi Hashem, I am God who took you out of Egypt. And that also was with an aleph. And God is teaching us humility right here by saying, I'm going to make space. And He literally had to make space for Moshe because, as we learned at the end of Pkudei, last week's parsha, the tabernacle was filled with God's glory and there was no room for Moshe to enter. So God had to diminish His presence, as it were, in order to allow man in. And that is the first and greatest lesson of how not only to share this world with God, but to share this world with other people, is to take ourselves down a notch, to make a little bit of space so that others can enter our sphere and so that we can enter into God's sphere. And the offerings, as we'll learn, is an exercise in making that space and in diminishing ourselves and in attaching ourselves to the world that God created and creating a place for us in the hierarchy of creation that God set out for us, and not trying to assume more than we should assume or to be the center of things, as you pointed out, Rabbi, which is so much of the ethos of today's modern society, that it's all about us. And you know what? The rest of the world can fly a kite because it's about me, and as long as what I'm doing satisfies me, then it's good. And it's not that way. It's not that way. And this, from the very first word, Vayikra, in the book of Leviticus, God's teaching us that it's not that way. You have to make room for others. You have to make room for God in this world, and God will make room for you in His world.
And people have a tendency, because we're so out of touch with these concepts and because we've become so disenfranchised and disconnected from everything about the temple, people have a tendency to look very askance at the whole concept of the offerings. And they're like, there's just so much slaughtering, and people really speak in a very arrogant way about these things of God. And the thing is, as we all know, the world has become one vast slaughterhouse.
Yes.
And it is dominated by cruelty, this world. And I'm talking right now about man's relationship with his fellow man. I'm not even talking about man's relationship with the animal world, which is more than cruel. It is just about immediate gratification. It is not what the Torah had in mind when Hashem permitted the generations after Noah to eat meat. The whole reason that Noah was allowed to eat meat after the flood and Adam wasn't allowed to eat meat in the Garden of Eden is so interesting. I mean, people don't understand this. The reason that Noah was permitted to eat meat was because he was so self-sacrificing and approached his job of taking care of all the animals on the ark with such tremendous humility and such love and compassion. He had such love and compassion for every single animal on the ark, going out of his way to find out what it is that they wanted to eat, feeding them around the clock at different times. He loved them so much that the message is that after the flood, God permitted him to eat meat. What does that mean? That was like his reward, like his tip for taking care of the meat? No. The idea is that only a person who really loves with compassion and understands the life force and really respects it should be allowed to eat it and deal with it, because that's the only person that can elevate this divine spark within, and that's the only person that would approach this the idea of how to deal with slaughtering an animal and eating it with mercy. It's like it always reminds me of the story about the holy Baal Shem Tov, who would only eat the meat that was slaughtered and prepared for him by his own personal a member of his group that was a ritual slaughterer, shochet. He had a name, Reb Tzvi. And this Reb Tzvi, it was said that when he used to take an animal, a cow, to the slaughter, he would walk the cow to the slaughterhouse with his arm around the cow's neck, crying and whispering into his ear. And it's like, that's exactly what it means to bring an offering in the Holy Temple. So as opposed to viewing what's going on in the Holy Temple as a slaughter, I would advise people who feel that way to understand that actually the killing of the animal that's going on in the Holy Temple is an exercise in total sensitivity to all life. And that's the instructions that are being given to the Kohanim in the Beit HaMikdash, and for a person who's bringing an offering. It's teaching a person how to appreciate and be sensitive to who we are as people and who we are not as animals, and who the animals are. And of course, the concept of the sin offering, which is a minority of all of the offerings in the temple, has to do with the fact that we may have been behaving like animals. But all the other offerings are about elevating all of the life force. And the idea is that today people consume meats for very selfish reasons. They don't think not for a second and not for less than half a second about the significance of what they're doing. They don't look at it. They don't think about it. They don't care to investigate what it's all about, what it means, what goes into it, how the animals are treated, etc., etc. And I'm not urging everybody to become a vegetarian, but I'm saying before you, that's another subject which I'd be glad to talk about if you want to, but before you go on a high platform, denigrating what's going on in the Holy Temple, ask yourself if you really understand what we're talking about here. We're talking about a mission, a life's mission. It's not even a project; it's a life's mission that the Israelites are given here, which is to go through life in as high a state of total constant sensitivity as possible. And that's what the experience in the Holy Temple is all about.
And if I may, Rabbi, at this point, change the subject.
You're not changing it, really, if I know where
Not really changing. I'd like to talk about our latest video offering, which is part 3 of the series of Mythbusters.
Exactly, the same deal is what I'm saying, is that everything about the Holy Temple, most of us in our generations have become so fragmented from. Most of what the concept of the Holy Temple is all about is something that's been lost to us completely. And that's, of course, what we're trying to do when we are trying to uplift the Shekhinah, as it were. We're trying to raise the consciousness of our people and the whole world to know why we need the Holy Temple. And just as we are totally disconnected to the Book of Vayikra, and just as we are totally uninformed and insensitive to what it means to eat meat or to bring an offering to Hashem, because Hashem commands it, if that's okay with you, for himself in the Holy Temple for our benefit, not because he needs the slaughtering of an animal or needs to see it or needs a vicarious substitute, but because he needs us to become the people that we could be. So to every concept relating to the temple we have become so insensitive to it,
become so sophisticated, we're so modern. We look down on it because we feel like we've really advanced so far. We're so
outgrown it, right? They don't belong to us anymore.
It used to go that way. Now it doesn't anymore.
So
they needed it, like that generation of the desert, which left Egypt, which crossed the Sea of Reeds, which stood at Sinai. Somehow they were less advanced and had less comprehension than we do. Go figure that.
So we embarked upon this series. We call it Mythbusters because we're trying to bust the myths, the preconceived notions, the prejudices that people have about these concepts. It's designed specifically and especially for Jewish people who have a background, because we find that a lot of Jewish people who have studied Torah, for some reason, they might be very proficient in Torah knowledge, but when it comes to the temple, they're totally how should I say this? They are
almost childlike, I would say.
they've just, they just take what they've been told by the establishment at face value, and they don't ask any questions about the things the positions that they hold, which don't make any sense according to Torah. For example, the very first chapter, the first chapter of Mythbusters was an introduction to the things that we want to be discussing. The second chapter, which you can find on the Temple Institute's YouTube page, was dealing with the highly regarded and oft repeated and widely circulated position that people have, that they believe that the third temple is going to descend miraculously from heaven. This is something that has gotten a lot of play over the centuries of the Jewish diaspora. And you find people that are, other than that, they're from Missouri. They're just like, show me. They are absolutely logical people. Yeah, Missouri is a show me state. Oh. and they want proof for everything. And they're very logical and they're very methodolocal. But when it comes to the idea of a building coming down from heaven that weighs millions of tons, they're willing to believe that. So that chapter called, what was it called?
That was called.
Anyway, it's the chapter. It's Mythbusters chapter 2, and it deals with the concept of whether or not the Holy Temple is going to come down from heaven, and we cited the sources and analyzed the concept. Because we do not believe that the Holy Temple is going to come down from heaven. We believe that that is an excuse, unfortunately, that people use and have been taught because it exonerates them from all personal responsibility. And so it's very convenient when people say, how in the world are we going to build a temple with the Muslims, with the Dome of the Rock, with the political situation and this and that? And the answer is, because Hashem is going to do it. Hashem is going to take care of the whole thing for us.
I'd like to clarify, when you say that we cite sources, we're citing rabbinical sources, the sources of our sages from time immemorial up to present times. It's not that we've come up with a new concept. No, we are teaching these ideas that have always been around, but people choose
don't study
to
it.
ignore them.
People do not study these things in depth. They study everything else that the Torah has to offer that is applicable to the entire gauntlet of Jewish life, from sunup to sundown, every detail, and they are observant, and they are careful, and they are scrupulous and diligent, and they love Hashem. But when it comes to this subject, maybe it's because people feel that it is not relevant, maybe because people feel that it's, things have changed since then. Whatever it is, people do not investigate what the sources of Torah really teach us about the Holy Temple. Because, of course, the truth is that it is a commandment for us to build a temple in our generation as well, no matter how difficult it seems. The second chapter that you can find, on our YouTube channel, is dealing with the issue, also very often misunderstood. Well, whose responsibility is it to build a temple? Let's say it's not going to come down from heaven. So whose responsibility is it to build it? Most people would say that when the Messiah comes, he's going to build a temple. That too can be used as a total excuse for inactivity. Is that true? If the commandment of building the temple is indeed a commandment that was given to all of Israel,
and
it was, as the Torah tells us in Exodus 25:8, and as Maimonides, for example, makes it perfectly clear that it is a positive commandment for us to build a temple, then why would we think that one person above others, if he's only a person, that is, and that might be another problem. Maybe you don't think he's a person. Maybe you don't think he's God. But maybe you think he's God. But Jews believe that Mashiach is a person. Then why would he be entrusted with the building the Holy Temple and not the nation? Mashiach didn't build the first temple. Mashiach didn't build the second temple. Oh, you think that there's proof somewhere that only Mashiach can build the third temple? Well, actually, doesn't exist. That's what this chapter is all about. And the fourth chapter, which is being prepared literally as we speak, and is going to be released soon, before the onset of the Passover holiday, that deals with an extremely timely concept, which is the Passover offering, the Korban Pesach, to be or not to be. Is it something that is absolutely ancient history, or are we expected by the Torah to bring the Passover offering in our time? And indeed, you can learn from this video when it comes out that many great rabbis of the past and the not so distant past have fought very hard for the resumption of the Passover offering, because it is an obligation upon all of Israel. It's not just any obligation. It is super important for the identity of the Jewish people. In the meantime, there's a dialogue going. It's very, very important for people to study these concepts. And I understand that these things challenge people's worldviews. They challenge their positions, they challenge their comfort zones more than anything else, and that's what this is really all about. Because when people are uncomfortable with the offerings in the Holy Temple, and by the way, after the Korban Pesach video, which is going to be released soon, we're going to have another chapter, God willing, which is going to be in general about the relevancy of all the offerings in today's world, which is of course what the Book of Leviticus is all about. So that when people cringe or take a step back when it comes to what they're reading in the Book of Leviticus or the concept of having the Holy Temple today, one of the things that's really going on is that they're feeling very uncomfortable and challenged about how these things could possibly be incorporated into their personal world today, because we're doing well without it, so who needs it? And people come up with all sorts of outlandish reasoning. And again, here's an interesting example of what I want to say. Some of these videos extensively cite from the works of Moses Maimonides, the great Rambam, because he wrote extensively. He was a great codifier. He's acknowledged universally as being one of the most important expositors of Jewish law. In fact, there's an expression that from Moses to Moses, there was nobody like Moses, and that's referring to two Moseses, Moshe Rabbeinu, the first one, and Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam. And when it comes to the concept of the Holy Temple, he is the undisputed authority. So these videos quote very extensively the writings of Maimonides because there are some people that when you tell them what the Torah itself says, they're not satisfied with the verse. But when you tell them what the rabbis say, they're more satisfied, okay? So Maimonides makes it very, very clear that, for example, the role of the Messiah is not to build the Holy Temple, nor is the role of the Messiah to accomplish any of the commandments for us, but we're all supposed to do the commandments all the time and not use the Messiah as an excuse. That's a direct quote from Maimonides in one of his books, Yigaret Hashmad. So somebody left a comment on the YouTube page that I've left up there, and I'm not sure exactly how I should respond to it. And the comment is, well, you have to understand, Rabbi, that you terribly misunderstand what Maimonides wrote, because your opinion is a lone opinion, and you have to understand that Maimonides had a very bad Jewish education. He says he was missing a lot. He didn't have a well-rounded Jewish education. Okay, and this to me was I'm stunned that someone could defend his own ignorance with such total arrogance as to just say, as opposed to saying, well, I don't understand this. He comes along and he says that Maimonides is problematic because he has a poor Jewish education. Mm-hmm. So why can't you say that about Rabbi Akiva? Why can't you say that about Moshe? Maybe we should start questioning the Jewish education of everyone.
Moshe had no Jewish education until the age of 80.
That's right. Avraham had no Jewish education at all. So it's a serious problem. But this guy comes along and he says, well, you have to understand these people didn't have a good Jewish education. And that's why he wrote that we shouldn't be depending on Mashiach to do our job for us, because he didn't have a good Jewish education. If he would have, then he would have understood that we're supposed to sit back and wait for Mashiach to do everything for us, just like he's doing.
As a matter of fact, what the crux of what Maimonides says is that if we haven't built the temple by the time Moshiach comes around, his job is going to point to us and say, build it. You haven't done it yet, build it. He's not going to build it. He's not going to lay the bricks. He's going to say to us, build it. That's the point. And there's another phenomenon that we've run into, and it's very educated, scholarly, and pious Jews who simply are unaware of the sources that the rabbi's been quoting in these videos, and their eyes are opened up. They may or may not, I don't know what, make of it, but they've never heard these sources before because they've been kept under wraps for so many years by authorities, I guess, that don't want to deal with it.
Listen, this is extremely apropos to the month of Nissan. And to today, what a privilege and an honor and an exciting thing to be able to be working towards the rebuilding of the Holy Temple and the resting of the Shekhinah in the world on the first day of the year, the first day of time, the first day of the month of Nissan, the month of redemption. And so, God willing, the redemption will be in Nissan or any time that God is ready, but we can't be the ones that should retard it. We have to do everything that we can to show that we are ready to do our part in bringing about the resting of the Shekhinah in this world, which is what the tabernacle and the Holy Temple is all about, which is what Passover is all about. That's true freedom, being able to serve Hashem.
And that is today's Temple Talk. Thank you so much for being with us.
Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh Tov. We'll be back next week.
A wonderful month of Nissan.
Temple Talk.